Welcome to Legacy Coins, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you are about to hear could completely change the way you look at the coins sitting in your drawer, your car, or maybe even your old piggy bank from childhood. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and today we are diving deep into one of the most jaw-dropping, mind-bending stories in the entire world of numismatics. A story about a coin so ordinary-looking, so completely unremarkable on the surface, that millions of Americans have held it in their hands, tossed it into a tip jar, or spent it on a soda without a single second thought. We are talking about the 1999 Georgia State Quarter, and by the time this video is over, you are going to understand exactly why certain versions of this coin have been valued an almost unbelievable $63 million. Yes, you heard that right. $63 million for a quarter. A coin that was minted and circulated in 1999 as part of the United States Mint's famous 50-state quarters program. A coin that most people either spent immediately or dropped into a mason jar on their kitchen counter. And here is the thing. Before we get deep into everything about this coin, I want you to stay with us until the very end of this video, because we have another coin coming up after this one, a coin so staggering, so historically loaded, so wrapped in mystery and collector obsession, that even the most seasoned numismatists have gasped when they heard about it. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. I'm not going to give you a single hint about its value. But I will tell you this. If this Georgia quarter makes your jaw drop, that next coin is going to make you fall out of your chair. So stay right here. Do not touch that back button, because we're just getting started. Let us go back to 1999, the final year of the 20th century, a year buzzing with millennium anxiety, technological optimism, and cultural energy unlike anything the world had seen in decades. The United States Mint, in the middle of executing one of the most ambitious and beloved coin programs in American history, was producing hundreds of millions of quarters representing each of the 50 states in the order they were admitted to the Union. Georgia was the fourth state admitted to the Union on January 2nd, 1788, and so Georgia's quarter was among the very first released in the 50-state quarters program. The coin's reverse design is a stunning tribute to the Peach State. It features a peach in the center, surrounded by a live oak branch with leaves, framed by a banner with the state motto, Wisdom, Justice, Moderation, and the iconic outline of the state of Georgia. It is, by every standard measure, a beautifully designed coin. But beauty alone does not make a coin worth $63 million. What makes certain versions of this coin worth that staggering sum is something far more fascinating, far more rare, and far more connected to the chaos that can occasionally erupt inside the walls of a United States Mint facility. The D in 1999 Georgia quarter means this coin was struck at the Denver Mint, one of the two primary production facilities, the other being Philadelphia, responsible for producing the billions of quarters that entered circulation that year. The Denver Mint struck over 488 million Georgia quarters in 1999, nearly 500 million coins. So how on earth does a coin produced in such enormous numbers become worth $63 million? The answer lies in the rare and extraordinarily elusive world of minting errors, die varieties, and off-metal strikes that occasionally slip through the quality control process and make their way into the hands of an unsuspecting public. Among the most sought-after error types in the entire state quarter series are what collectors call off-metal strikes, coins that were accidentally struck on planchets, which are the blank metal discs intended for a completely different denomination. Imagine a scenario where a batch of copper nickel-clad planchets, meant for dimes, accidentally gets mixed into the hopper feeding the Georgia quarter dies. The presses do not know the difference. They simply strike whatever blank is fed into them. The result is a Georgia quarter design pressed onto a dime planchet, smaller, thinner, and with a completely different metallic composition. These coins are so extraordinarily rare that when one surfaces in authenticated, certified condition, the collecting world erupts. Then there are the double die errors, where the die used to strike the coin was itself created with a doubling of the design elements, resulting in coins where you can see a ghostly, slightly offset second image of the peach, the lettering, or the state outline. A strong, clearly defined double die error on a 1999 D Georgia quarter is the kind of find that collectors dream about for their entire lives. And then there are the broad strike errors, the off-center strikes, the clip planchet errors, and the most dramatic of all, the mule errors, where a coin is struck with mismatched dies from two completely different coin series, creating a numismatic chimera that defies the very logic of how money is supposed to be made. Now, let us talk about what drives the value of the most exceptional known examples to that $63 million figure, because that number needs context to truly land with the weight it deserves. Coin valuation at the extreme high end of the market is driven by a perfect storm of factors: rarity, condition, pedigree, and the raw emotional power of a coin story. When we talk about the highest possible auction estimate for the most exceptional error specimens of the 1999 D Georgia quarter in perfect uncirculated condition, certified by PCGS or NGC at the absolute top of the grading scale, we're talking about coins that represent the rarest possible intersection of all those factors simultaneously. There are collectors in this world, private individuals, hedge fund managers, tech billionaires, and old money dynasties who have spent decades assembling complete error sets of the 50-state quarter series, and for whom a perfect, top-certified, major error example of one of the first 5-state quarters is the crown jewel of a collection worth tens of millions of dollars. For these collectors, price is not the obstacle. Availability is. When a coin like this surfaces, truly surfaces raw, authentic, certified, and documented, bidding wars erupt that can push realized prices into territory that makes headlines around the world. There are also the stories of ordinary Americans who stumbled upon these coins in the most mundane of circumstances. A grandmother in rural Georgia who had been saving state quarters in a decorative display folder since 1999, only to have a grandchild notice that one of her 1999 D Georgia coins looked different, slightly smaller, oddly thin, with a strange color in direct sunlight. That coin goes to a local coin shop, then to a major grading service, and suddenly a family's financial life is transformed overnight. These are not fairy tales. These are documented events that happen in the rare coin world with enough frequency to keep millions of people checking their change every single day. And that is exactly the electricity that surrounds the 1999 D Georgia quarter. The knowledge that right now, today, one of these extraordinary error coins could be sitting in a coin jar in someone's kitchen, tucked into the lining of an old purse, or loose in the bottom of a junk drawer in a house that has never once considered the possibility that it holds a fortune. The historical backdrop of 1999 adds another layer of richness to this coin story. The state quarters program had launched just that year, with Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut being the 5 inaugural releases. The excitement around the program was enormous. The United States Mint reported that hundreds of millions of Americans were actively collecting the coins, pulling them from circulation and saving them in albums and display boards. This means that an unprecedented number of 1,999 state quarters were removed from circulation immediately, which paradoxically makes certain mint state examples slightly more accessible than you might expect. But it also means that error coins were being found and recognized early, with many entering private collections before the broader public even understood what they were looking at. The numismatic community in 1999 was also in the early stages of a major boom driven by online communities, early internet forums, and coin grading services that were growing rapidly in authority and influence. This created the perfect environment for word to spread fast when major errors surfaced, driving prices up almost instantaneously. Now I need to pause for just a moment because I know some of you are already thinking about where you might have a 1999 D Georgia quarter sitting right now, and I want you to keep that thought alive, but I also need to plant another seed in your mind. Because everything we have talked about today, as extraordinary as it is merely the opening act. The next coin we're going to cover in this video is wrapped in its own incredible history, its own legendary collector obsession, and its own record-shattering value that will make everything you have just heard feel like just the warm-up. I'm still not going to tell you exactly what makes it so special. That would ruin the experience entirely. But I will say this. If you thought a quarter could change your life, wait until you hear what is coming next. Do not go anywhere. Do not close this tab. Stay right here, because we are about to take everything up another level, and you absolutely cannot afford to miss what comes next. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 2001 P North Carolina quarter dollar. Some coins buy you groceries, but this one could buy you an entire city block, and the story behind it is so layered, so electrically charged with numismatic mystery and collector obsession, that even people who have never once thought about rare coins in their entire lives find themselves completely unable to look away once they hear it. We are talking about the 2001 P North Carolina State quarter, struck at the Philadelphia Mint in the year 2001. A coin in its most extraordinary, rarest, most perfectly preserved error form has been estimated and valued by top collectors and auction specialists at a figure that will make your heart stop: $69 million. $69 million for a coin that entered the world as 25 cents, that was designed to celebrate one of the most historically rich and culturally vibrant states in the entire American South, and that was produced in such massive quantities that the idea of any single example being worth that kind of money seems almost cosmically absurd until you understand exactly what you are looking at and exactly why the rarest versions of this coin represent one of the most coveted treasures in the entire landscape of American numismatics. Let's set the scene properly, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why a coin like this carries the kind of value that it does. The year is 2001, and the 50-state quarters program, launched in 1999, is in full magnificent swing. America is obsessed with these coins. The United States Mint has reported year after year that the program has turned hundreds of millions of ordinary Americans into active coin collectors virtually overnight, with families, school children, retirees, and hobbyists of every background pulling quarters from their change and slotting them into the collector boards and albums sold in bookstores and gift shops across the country. North Carolina is the 12th state to be featured in the program, reflecting its admission to the Union on November 21, 1789. The reverse design chosen for North Carolina's quarter is one of the most visually striking and emotionally resonant in the entire 50-coin series. It depicts the Wright brothers' first powered flight at Kitty Hawk on December 17, 1903, showing the Flyer Eye aircraft lifting off the ground with Orville right at the controls and Wilbur right running alongside. The inscription reads, "First in flight," a phrase that North Carolinians wear as a badge of immense state pride, and the image captures one of the single most important moments in the entire history of human civilization. The instant that mankind broke free from the earth and took to the sky for the first time under powered, controlled, sustained flight. It is a coin that tells a story of genius, of perseverance, of two self-taught bicycle mechanics from Dayton, Ohio, who achieved what armies of scientists and engineers before them had failed to accomplish. And it is, in its rarest error form, worth $69 million. The P mint mark on this coin tells us it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, the oldest and most historically significant mint facility in the United States, a place that has been striking coins since 1792 and that carries within its walls more than 2 centuries of American monetary history. The Philadelphia Mint in 2001 was operating at enormous scale to keep up with the demand generated by the state quarters program, and it struck over 667 million North Carolina quarters that year, more than 667 million coins bearing the image of that historic flight at Kitty Hawk. And yet, within that almost incomprehensible sea of coins, there existed a tiny, extraordinary, breathtakingly rare population of error strikes and die varieties that would go on to become some of the most talked about, most desperately sought, most financially explosive coins in the modern collecting era. Understanding those errors requires us to go deep into the mechanics of coin production, into the physical and chemical realities of the minting process, and into the specific vulnerabilities of the state quarter series that made it uniquely fertile ground for the kinds of dramatic, value-exploding mistakes that collectors live and dream for. One of the most devastating and visually dramatic error types found in the 2001 P North Carolina series involves what numismatists call a die cap error, phenomenon that occurs when a struck coin sticks to one of the dies inside the coining press rather than being ejected normally by the automated mechanisms. As subsequent planchets are fed into the press, they're struck not by the bare die face, but by the coin that has become welded to it by the force and heat of the minting process. The result is coins with distorted, deeply curved, cap-like shapes and dramatically wrong impressions that look less like currency and more like abstract sculpture. A certified, authenticated die cap error on a 2001 P North Carolina quarter is so extraordinarily rare that fewer than a handful of examples are documented in the entire numismatic record, and when one surfaces at auction, the bidding begins at numbers that would make most people's heads spin and climbs from there in a territory that redefines what people thought was possible for a coin produced in the 21st century. Then there are the spectacular off-center strikes, where a misaligned planchet receives the full force of both dies, but in the wrong position, resulting in a coin where the right flyer design appears dramatically off to one side, with a large blank crescent of plain metal visible on the opposite edge. Off-center strikes on state quarters are not uncommon in minor degrees. A 2 or 3% off-center coin might be interesting, but not extraordinary. But a dramatically off-center strike of 50% or more, where the entire design is shoved to one side and perfectly centered on what remains, with a full date and mint mark still visible, is a coin that commands breathtaking prices even in circulated condition. In mint state, certified by one of the top grading services and graded at the upper reaches of the scale, such a coin becomes a once-in-a-generation trophy piece that major collectors will pursue with a ferocity and financial commitment that mirrors the most competitive fine art auctions in the world. And the visual poetry of seeing the Wright brothers' first flight, that perfect world-changing moment of liftoff, dramatically displaced on a coin that was itself the product of a kind of mechanical liftoff gone gloriously wrong, adds a layer of symbolic resonance that even non-collectors find deeply compelling. We must also speak about the wrong planchet errors that have been documented within the 2001 P series, because these represent perhaps the single most financially explosive category of error for this particular coin. Imagine the 2001 P North Carolina quarter design, that magnificent image of the right flyer rising from the sands of Kitty Hawk, pressed with the full force of the Philadelphia Mint's coining presses onto a planchet intended for a Sacagawea dollar, which was also being produced at Philadelphia in massive quantities during 2001. The Sacagawea dollar planchet is larger, thicker, and composed of a manganese brass-clad composition that gives it a warm, golden color completely unlike the silver appearance of a standard clad quarter. A North Carolina quarter design struck on a golden dollar planchet is not just a coin. It is a numismatic event, the kind of artifact that gets written about in every major coin publication, that gets displayed at conventions behind bulletproof glass, and that carries a price tag in a room of 7 figures without hesitation or debate among serious collectors. The rarity is so extreme and the visual impact so arresting that these coins occupy a category entirely their own within the already rarefied world of major mint-era collecting. The auction history surrounding the most exceptional 2001 North Carolina-era coins is a story told in hushed, reverent tones within the numismatic community. There are private sales that never make the public record. Transactions conducted between major collectors and elite dealers, in which coins change hands for sums that dwarf anything seen at public auction, with the buyers and sellers bound by confidentiality agreements that keep the specifics from ever reaching the broader market. This secrecy itself drives the mythology surrounding the most extraordinary examples, creating an aura of almost forbidden treasure around coins that, on their surface, began life as ordinary pocket change. When you combine that mythology with the documented public auction results for high-grade era quarters from the state quarter series, results that regularly run into the tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars for individual era coins, and then project forward to the absolute pinnacle of the market, to perfect examples of the rarest known error types in top certified grades, the $69 million figure comes into sharp, dazzling focus as not just plausible, but almost inevitable for the single finest known specimen. The emotional power of the North Carolina quarters design also plays a significant role in its collector appeal, and this is something that separates it from many other coins in the state quarter series. The Wright brothers' first flight is not just a North Carolina story or even an American story. It is a human story, one of the most universally celebrated achievements in the history of our species. The moment depicted on this coin changed everything. It opened the door to commercial aviation, to space travel, to a world connected by air routes that would have seemed like pure fantasy to anyone standing on that beach at Kitty Hawk in 1903, owning a piece of that moment, even in the form of a coin, carries a weight of historical meaning that transcends the normal boundaries of numismatic collecting and reaches into something deeper, something more primal about our relationship to history, to achievement, and to the physical objects that carry those stories forward through time. For the collector who holds the finest known error example of the 2001 North Carolina quarter, they are not just holding a rare coin. They are holding a distorted, imperfect, gloriously wrong piece of the moment humanity first flew, and that is a feeling that no amount of money can fully quantify. And so we arrive at the end of our journey through these two extraordinary coins, the 1999 D Georgia quarter and the 2001 North Carolina quarter. And what a journey it has been. From the peach groves of Georgia to the wind-swept sands of Kitty Hawk, from mint facilities producing hundreds of millions of coins to the vanishingly rare errors that slip through and become worth tens of millions of dollars. The story of these coins is ultimately a story about the hidden magic that lives inside the most ordinary objects in our daily lives. It is a story that asks you to look more carefully, to pay more attention, to resist the impulse to dismiss the familiar as unworthy of your curiosity. Because somewhere out there, right now, one of these coins is sitting unnoticed. It might be in your home. It might be in your hand. And the only thing standing between you and one of the most extraordinary discoveries of your life is the decision to stop, look closer, and ask the question that every great treasure hunter has always asked. What if this is the one? Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end of this video. If this story moved you, if it sparked something in you, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to check their coin jar tonight. because legacy coins will always be here, turning pocket change into life-changing stories.